Hey, let's have a look at how we can integrate Traffic Parrot with testRigor automated test and continue testing when the test environment is down. So what we've got here is a situation where we've got our testRigor automated tests that are testing our finance application, which is the web user interface in the middleware, and that middleware is connecting to a backend service, the market data API. And unfortunately, the market data API is sometimes unavailable. The environment is down or intermittently unavailable. So the problem we have is the testRigor tests fail, but it's not because there's something wrong with the tests. They're perfect. There's nothing wrong with the finance application either. The problem is the environment in the backend goes down. So how can we solve this issue? So let's have a look at our finance application first. It's a simple web application. All it does is it has this web user interface that sends a request to the middleware. The middleware sends the request to the backend, okay? And all it does is, if I refresh the page, you'll see in a second, it fetches the Apple stock quote last price from the middleware and then the backend, okay? And the issue we have is that we're running our testRigor tests here, and let me show you this test. It's a very simple test case. It tests that the page has a price and it's between 1 and 1,000 and that the color of the price is green, okay? Unfortunately, if you look at the historical runs, got a lot of failures, and that's because the environment goes intermittently down, okay? So if I run this test right now, it might be green or it might be red, but it's not because there's an issue with the test or with the application. It's because the backend environment sometimes goes down. Now, what can we do about the situation? What we can use is service simulation. So on the left-hand side, you see traditional testing infrastructure without service simulation. We've got our system under test that's connecting to different systems like the transaction system, user data systems, third-party systems. And on the right-hand side, what we've got is a testing infrastructure with simulators, where our system under test is using the simulators, not the real systems, okay? How would that work in our case? Well, what we can do is put API simulators, also called mocks or virtual services, between the finance application and the market data API to record the traffic between the middleware and the backends while we're running our tests, and then put it into playback mode. And what that gives us is this ability to be able to test our finance application and run our testRigor test without having to communicate with the environment that's intermittently down. And the finance application, the middleware, will only be communicating with Traffic Parrot API simulators. Okay? So let's have a look at how that would be done. So first of all, what we need to do is point the API simulator at the Traffic Parrot API simulator recorder at the market data API. And where do we find the URL of the real market data API, the backend environment? It's going to be in the middleware. So let's go open up the middleware. And we can see I've logged into the middleware that the URL of the API is just this. So go ahead and copy that. And what we'll need to do again is put that URL into Traffic Parrot and start a recorder. So the Traffic Parrot's proxying all traffic to the market data API. Okay. And this is Traffic Parrot. It's got a web user interface as well. And what I'll do is go to HTTP record, paste that URL, and start recording. And there we go. We've got a recorder running. So we've got Traffic Parrot recorder running and pointing, forwarding or proxying all traffic to the backend environment. We still have to reconfigure the middleware to point at Traffic Parrot instead of the real backend environment. Let's go ahead and do that, and we can do that in the same properties file of the middleware application where we found the URL of that real endpoint. So here, instead of pointing at the real endpoint, we're saying just use localhost 8081, which is Traffic Parrot. So what we've got right now is the setup where we got a testRigor automated test that are testing a finance application, and the middleware of the finance application sending requests to Traffic Parrot API simulator, which will forward those requests to the backend system, and same with the responses. It will forward the responses back to the middleware. So let's run our testRigor test and see what happens. Okay, so our test has passed now, and what has happened? The automated test sent a request to the web user interface. It browsed the finance application's web user interface, which sent a request to the middleware, which forwarded the request to Traffic Parrot, which forwarded the request to the backend service. Okay, so from the testRigor's point of view, there's no change, right? You saw the test is passing as it was. However, we should see something in Traffic Parrot recorded. So let's go ahead to Traffic Parrot and see what's been recorded. And there we go. We can see something has been recorded, and Traffic Parrot saw a request from the middleware to /stock quote symbol Apple, and it captured a response from the backend service where you can see the last price is here, the one that gets presented to the user. Okay, so what happens right now is we've stopped the recording. So what's going to happen right now is, doesn't matter how many times I've refreshed this page, there's no more communication with the real services. No more communication with the real services with that flaky backend environment. This application communicates only with Traffic Parrot. So we're in this situation right now. The automated test, or me, like you just saw right now, will run against the finance application, and they only communicate with the API simulators. No more communication with the flaky environment. So what that means is, doesn't matter how many times we run our testRigor suite of tests, it's always going to be passing as long as there's no issues with the test or the finance application, because the environment downtime and the flakiness of the backend environment has been eliminated from the picture. So I can rerun this test right now many times, and it's always going to be passing. Perfect. You see, so I've run the test and it was green. And it doesn't matter how many times I run this test, it will always be green because there's no more communication with the backend services. So yeah, this is a very powerful technique when you're writing your automated tests and you're on your test automation journey. And you might find yourself in one of these three buckets when it comes to your test automation journey. You might be starting your test automation journey. You might be in the middle of your test automation journey, scaling the adoption of test automation, 20 to 80% of test automation, or you might be at the very end of your test automation journey where you've got almost everything automated. And Traffic Parrot will help you to get from the early stages to the later stages much faster. And how do we do that? Well, we already saw that we can help you with your backend environments when they're down, right? And this is an issue that will impact your test automation journey even when you're starting out, right? So it doesn't matter if you're starting out, if you're in your scaling stage of testing automation, or you're at the very end of your test automation journey and everything's pretty much automated, backend environments being down impact all of those stages, okay? So if you have this issue, use Traffic Parrot. Similar to APIs or services not available. If you're starting out with your test automation journey and the APIs or services are not yet available because the backend team or the middleware team are not yet ready to deliver those services, and you'd like to test the, let's say, the web UI and the middleware together, but the backend service is not available, you won't be able to write your automated test. Well, you'll write your automated test, but they will be failing, right? However, you can import into Traffic Parrot the Open API or other types of specifications of those services. Traffic Parrot will create them simulators for you, and you can continue testing with testRigor or the web application and the middleware without the presence of the backend services. You might see issues like slow manual processes in backend or third-party systems that prevent automation. So we've got clients where certain processes, when you send a request, take 2 days to come back, okay? So how do you run your automated tests in that case? You can't wait for 2 days for these tests to pass. So what you do instead is simulate those services with Traffic Parrot, and what you get is immediate responses in milliseconds instead of days or hours. For example, you might have issues where you're running your automated tests very frequently and the test data changes break existing automated tests. For example, you're burning through your test data, or there's different types of teams that use the same test data and they break your automated test. So it's not an issue with the test or with your production codes or with your code, it's an issue with the test data. So if you're starting your journey with test automation using Traffic Parrot simulators, has already a moderate to high return on investment. Right? If you're starting your journey, if you experience backend environments are down, issues, if you don't have those APIs or services yet available, etc., etc. When you're scaling your test automation, that's where Traffic Parrot simulators have already a high to very high return on investment. It's pretty much impossible to go beyond certain levels of automation. If you look at, for example, the World Quality Report from 2025, they say that many enterprises end their test automation journey at 20, 30 or 40% of test automation coverage due to these reasons, right? And the reason is it's super hard to write and continue doing your test automation in the presence of these issues without API or system simulation. Okay, so if you're not just starting your test automation journey, but you already got some tests and you want to scale the usage of testRigor and automate even more, it's going to be even more needed for you to run service simulators. And then if you're at the very end of your test automation journey, it's pretty much impossible for most enterprises to get to those levels of automation without using service simulators. Okay, so pretty sure if you're at the very end of that journey, you're already using some type of simulation or mocking and you just want to improve the way you're doing it, so feel free to reach out to us as well. Okay, so what happens if you wanted to get started and have a look at this, play around with this and see how this could help you? First of all, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're always happy to help, even with the initial stages. However, you're welcome to try this yourself as well and download the free 14-day evaluation from our website. Thank you so much for watching and hopefully speak to you soon. Bye bye.